Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today's video is going to be a carry tier list for patch 7.38b, and yes, it's going to be tier list week, so every day is going to be a new tier list for each position every day of the week so far, so look out for those, and the meta has kind of settled out now. After the big patch, it was pretty obvious that they were going to quickly, nerf a lot of the broken things, which they did after a couple weeks, and now it's been a couple weeks since the B patch, and things have sort of settled, so now we can kind of say, oh, this is the meta, and yeah, things are going to shift still. I think this patch is going to be around for a while, and things might, get a lot better that we didn't really expect, or things that were once strong that are kind of on the downswing might drop even more. We'll just have to see. But for right now, I think this meta is pretty understood, at least for the most part, other than those kind of small things that will change here and there. So now let's just jump into S tier with the first S tier hero, and that is going to be Slark. And this hero has kind of been hanging around in the meta now for a while, and they didn't really touch it too much. In fact, in 7.38, I think they buffed Dark Reef Renegade, but that was kind of pointless because most people just pick this one anyway, and that was really more of a buff to like support Slark, which people have been experimenting with, but it's not like that good. But carry Slark has been like A tier, maybe B tier for the last couple years, and they changed things here and there. They actually have nerfed this shard like a million times in a row. The AoE is actually so much smaller than even the visual effect now. It's kind of weird, but still, there haven't been a ton of changes. It's just that this hero has kind of stuck around, and now it's very good because of the specific style of meta in terms of what carries are good, and also that all of the other very good strength carries were nerfed in the B patch. So basically, if you didn't know, a lot of the good carries for this recent patch, because of the way the camps are structured, because the camps in the jungle in the river are further away, there's also an ancient camp and just a small camp that's kind of awkward. A lot of the heroes that are good in the meta are lane dominating heroes that can just take over their lane, kick people out, be hard to kill. So we have like Slark with the ult, with the jump, obviously Ursa with the ult. We even have PA, which can be a very good laner. We have Lifestealer with the rage. We have all these heroes that have a way to kind of stick in their lane, and not necessarily farmers like Medusa or Luna, or heroes that can get kicked out of their lane. That's usually not very good. So Slark is definitely one of those where specific matchups, this hero can absolutely dominate. Now, there are kind of weaker matchups and things like that at times, but this hero doesn't really need to farm the jungle as much. Like, he can just farm those two camps near the lane, and that's adequate for him. And then the other thing is that these heroes that I talked about already are really, really good at showing up to early fights, because they just need some levels, maybe one early item, and then they can fight. Even if they're going Battle Fury, sometimes like a PA or an Ursa, they don't even need that Battle Fury to fight, because they're, they have a slow, they have a jump, they have other methods of dealing with the enemy or fighting, and Slark is definitely one of those where you want to show up to fights because you have your pounce, you have your damage, you want to get those essence shift stacks, that free agility, that stolen agility as much as you can, and your ultimate is really low cooldown now as well. So once you hit 6, you can just participate in every fight across the map, and that's really the meta right now, and that's why Slark is now S tier. And I would say this is probably mostly for pubs. It is getting picked, in pro games here and there, but it's maybe not the most popular carry. It's more of like a pub carry, I would say. So it's a very, very good hero right now. The build hasn't changed too much. That's the thing. There's not been too many crazy changes with this hero. It's not like completely different than it was before. Very similar to what it's always been. It just kind of risen in the meta because of the style of play for carries, like I said, and that the other carries got nerfed. Then next is another one of my favorite heroes, which is Ursa. And this hero is kind of similar to Slark in the sense that it was always hanging around, maybe A or B tier. Maybe a couple patches ago, it was even like C tier. It wasn't that great, but it was always a viable, decent, just never the best. And now it's the same kind of situation with Slark, is it's just sort of risen to prominence because of the style of carry that is now popular in the lane, and then also because all of the other carries, like I said, got nerfed. So it's sort of the same story. This hero doesn't do anything crazy different. It's a lot of the same stuff that we've been seeing, but especially because you can fight early with this hero, even though you're going Battle Fury, like, you can still participate. You're very hard to kill with your ultimate, and then you obviously go blink second item most of the time, and that can really ramp this hero up. Plus, doing Roche is obviously very, very important too. Being able to do the Tormentors now is great as well, which this hero's great at with the ultimate, not getting like killed or taking that much damage, even though that was nerfed a little bit. There are just these things about the hero that end up making it very good, and so that's why it's risen to prominence. Again, I think more of a pub hero than a like pro game hero, but still, this is probably the best carry along with Slark that I would say you should generally pick in pubs. And also, like, I'm just biased. Like, let's just be honest. These are probably my two most played carries, my two favorite carries, so I am going to put them in S tier because when they're good, and they are good, I mean, don't get me wrong, on Dota 2 Pro Tracker, they're up there, and they're still getting picked in competitive. I just think for pubs, these are probably the two best carries right now, and this is more a pub list in general. But then we can move on to the next hero, or the next two heroes, and these are kind of probably more like the top MMR pro game kind of carries that we're seeing a lot of right now as well. And the first hero in this kind of more pro game, high MMR tier carry hero is Nature's Prophet. And that's not to say that you can't play Nature's Prophet in your games, because it is very good. It just takes a little more skill, a little bit more coordination. And the thing that makes this hero strong is, even though you're not necessarily like a lane dominator in the same way that maybe a Ursa is or other things like that, although you do have very good matchups, your right click is very good, your range, your attack speed, all this kind of stuff, your trees can be very annoying, you can push towers early, all that kind of stuff. The real strength of this hero and why it's getting picked so much is because all of the camps are now super awkward. You can just show up to any fight no matter what camp you're farming. So all those kind of like, river camps, they're just super spaced apart, like in this weird awkward way. That camp all the way in the corner, like near your base, there was a camp there before, but there was like more camps linking up to it, so it just felt better to be farming there. A lot of heroes don't really like to be there because it just feels so bad and so awkward and so far away from everything else. This hero doesn't have to care about that. And it's almost like a replacement for the Spectre of last patch, where in a similar kind of way, you could be anywhere on the map at any time and participate in all the ganks. This hero is just like that. Every team fight, no matter where it is, every tower defense, every tower push, you can be there with this hero. And that's really what is making this hero strong. This hero is another one of those where it always seems like if you wanted to, you could probably pick Nature's Prophet carry, and then it just seems to always kind of come back into the meta at some point. It gets nerfed because it's too strong. And then a couple years later, after everything else gets nerfed and this hero gets a few buffs, now it's right back to being a carry like it was before. At other times it was because of the Sprout leash talent and all that other kind of stuff. That's not really the main reason that this hero is good anymore. I believe they also removed one of them. So it doesn't do that same kind of thing that it did before, which is super annoying, where you're leashed and stuff like that. It's more about the presence on the map, the ability to farm quickly, and all these kinds of things that are just really the focus of the meta. We'll see if this stays as one of the good heroes in this meta. It's hard to really say. Right now, it's getting picked a ton, and the win rate is great. So I think it's probably here to stay. We'll just have to see. And again, you can definitely pick it in pubs. It is kind of more right now like a pro or high MMR hero. Like if you go to Dota 2 Pro Tracker or see what the pros are picking in the recent tournaments. But still, if you can get good at this hero and know how to use him and not like TP and feed all the time, or like really coordinate with your team correctly and effectively, you can make this hero work, and it is very, very good. And then the last one here is another kind of pro hero that, if you're a smurf or if you're a spammer of one hero and you want to pick a hero that can just dominate every game, Morph is your hero. And it's just so weird because it feels like another one where no matter what they do to this hero, even if they nerf it into oblivion, it always seems to be like, immediately they nerf it and people are like, oh, this hero sucks, like we're not picking it anymore. It drops down to like a D tier. But then over time, like, a week goes by, a month goes by, and like the hero's not really touched, but people are like, oh wait, Morph is still playable. Morph can still stomp games. Like last patch, it was the build with the just going for Conda and having the Vlads, and it was kind of like an awkward build, but it was still like you just blow people up and delete people. Well, that was kind of removed, so people probably thought, Morphling's not really it anymore. It's not really that great. And now we have Lifestealer, now we have Mag, now we have DK. This hero probably dropped off in the initial 7.38 to maybe like a C tier, and you're like, Morph, we're just kind of gonna forget about this hero. But then, it's always been pretty good in, high MMR games and pro games, and then everything else gets nerfed, and we're like, wait, actually, you don't necessarily even need to go that blowing up people with one-shotting people with the Conda build. Like, that's not necessary. Yes, it was really good and broken last patch, but it's not a requirement for the hero. Like, that's not what this hero needed to be good. It's good anyway, just building normal carry items. So now that everything else got nerfed, actually, this is really, really good. We're going to pick this a bunch, and it can still stomp games, and that's really the story with Morph here in this patch. Nothing crazy different, nothing super special. It's not like a weird, awkward, or specialized, build just from this patch. Is like, this is the only thing you can do, like the Conda build, or it wasn't like before, a couple years ago when it stole stats from enemies with the Ags or whatever with the ultimate. Like, there's been times where there's been weird gimmicks for the hero. Now it's just like, this hero's just a great carry. Like, I think that's just the long and short of it. It's just hard to kill, hard to bring down, has an amazing laning stage, does a lot of those same things, can fight after it gets levels, can stay in the lane very consistently, can farm very quickly, all that kind of stuff, and it just makes this hero a great hero. Again, maybe not as much of a pub hero, more of a pro high MMR hero, but if you can get good at the hero, if you know how to play it, if you can spam it, you can absolutely stomp games. Actually, I would say if you are somebody that wants to, play a high skill hero, if you can learn this hero and master it and be good at it, you will just climb MMR, which I feel like is why you don't see a lot of Morphlings in general pubs at most MMRs. Then moving on to A tier, we have Lifestealer, and this hero, if it wasn't for the B patch, would have been S. You could maybe even still call this hero like borderline S. I still think it's very good, but it did get nerfed. It doesn't get nearly as much HP from last hits and kills, and I think the biggest thing too is that disarm on the Ags was really, really big. I think despite, yeah, you might have 100 less HP or 150, 200 at some point in the game, 30, 40 minutes, but that's not a huge deal. Like, it is important, but it's not the biggest of deals. I think really that disarm is huge, because before you could literally just jump into an enemy carry, you're doing damage to them, you're tracking them down, you're healing yourself, and they literally can't do damage in the fight unless they have a spell. Well, now that's not really the case anymore. Like, if you jump into them with your ultimate, it is annoying to them. They are taking damage. They can't really get rid of you, but they can still do everything they want to do in the fight, because most carries obviously are right-click carries. I think that's a huge, huge nerf for the hero, and that's what makes the hero, I think, just not as good. All those number nerfs plus that huge nerf with the disarm, I think, brings it down to A, although it's still very good. Still is good in the lane, kind of stays in the lane, hard to kick out of the lane, just farms that area. And if you do get your items later, you're very, very hard to bring down and can just whittle people down and just, siege towers and all that kind of stuff. Doing a lot of those same things. Lifesteal hasn't changed in that way, just the numbers aren't as good. Then DK, honestly, this hero could eventually become B or even lower. I don't know. It is on the downswing. People are still picking it, having some success with it, but it got huge nerfs, probably the biggest nerf of the B patch, because it was the best hero of the 7.38 patch. Actually, it was completely broken and actually glitched at one point, and they corrected that. But regardless, it was definitely the biggest nerfed hero, and people are kind of experimenting with the non-red facets, with the slow one and the poison one, stuff like that. Maybe, who knows, someone will realize, oh wait, the slow one is insane, now it's S again or something like that. But I think I'm putting it at A right now because I still think it's at the point where we're like in the middle of the drop off from like Bitcoin or a stock. Like, it's right at the middle. I still think it's going to go lower. That's personally my opinion. So maybe over the next month it'll drop down to B. You'll see it not get picked as much. The win rate will tank. I don't know. We'll have to see, unless they pick a different facet and that's actually broken. I think the red facet just isn't nearly as good, and I'm putting it here because the win rate and pick rate are still decent. It still does, the same thing it was doing in the patch even before that, and the patch with the magic damage on the right click and all that kind of stuff. And now you can cleave with the dragon, so maybe you're not farming as fast, but you still do a similar carry build. It just, I think that has gone downhill a lot, and it might just kind of disappear completely in the next month or so. And then we have Monkey King, and this hero is just kind of like a little bit of a worse version of these other heroes. It's also a very good pro hero because it is a good flex pick to mid and carry. It does have mobility. You kind of dominate the lane. You do all these other things. It's just not as popular, and the win rate isn't as good as some of these other heroes, but it is still very, very solid, very, very good. Nothing crazy new or different about the hero. And actually, it did get nerfed in the last patch, or not necessarily, I think, the B patch, but the 7.38 patch, when it was very, very good as a mid, because it had like 0 cooldown eventually on the jump. So you could just jump to trees like almost infinitely and just escape everything. But that was when it was really good mid. It is still good mid, but now because that mobility isn't there as much, it's more of a carry, and it's kind of gone up in the carry ranks because of the style of play, like we've already talked about, and that all these other things got nerfed. And then for like the last two, these are Battle Fury builders. Anti-Mage, I think, is just kind of rising in the ranks in a similar kind of way to these other heroes. It is a little bit better in the lane than it used to be. It does have some bad lane matchups, but I think a lot of these heroes like Puck and Queen of Pain and all these intelligence heroes that people are picking now, this hero can really take advantage of all of those more popular intelligence heroes that are good. The other thing is, because all of those tanky strength heroes got nerfed and they're less popular, that makes Anti-Mage more popular, and he can take advantage of the awkward camps more than most other heroes, because he does have this insane mobility and blink. He buys Battle Fury. It's not really as big of a deal for him to kind of farm all these awkward camps and awkward spots on the map as it is for Ursa. And now, because everything is kind of centralized a little bit more, the Roche is now in the river, the camps on the outskirts are awkward, you would only go to the corner of the map because of the, occasional tormentor that you want to do. That actually benefits Anti-Mage, because now there's kind of more places that he can go that people don't really want to go and hunt him down. So split pushing is a little bit easier now on this kind of hero, because there's more space on the map that is a little bit awkward for the enemy. So I think that really is what makes Anti-Mage better in this patch. And who knows, you might have like the opinion that I'm overrating this hero a little bit, but its win rate and pick rate is pretty decent right now, and I definitely think that you can stomp games with this hero. It's definitely good. And then PA is another one that, who knows, maybe I'm rating this a little bit high. It did get nerfed and changed a little bit here or there in the last patch. I still am not 100% sure whether I like the methodical facet or the other facet better. I still like that the other facet you can just crit randomly. I still prefer that in pubs. The methodical facet is very good, but it did kind of get changed a little bit. But even so, like, I don't think it was as good as it was before, but you actually don't go out of your invis now when you hit creeps with that. So that is a huge benefit, which was a big thing with the other facet before that I didn't like. But that extra dagger, actually, because I did try that, the dagger speeds up your farm and actually helps a lot in fights because you're going to be daggering heroes in a fight. And if you blow them up and kill them, that's just another free dagger. And that can kind of snowball in fights and really actually be pretty good. So anyway, it's hard to really say which one is best, even though the higher MMR and pub players, whether it's pro or pub, like to pick methodical. I would say you can still pick both. And this hero, even though the win rate isn't the best, I still think it's a very much a pub stomping hero. So you could potentially argue for it to be B, but I think because it is such a good pub stomper, you can dominate lanes. If people don't know what they're doing and you get out of control and you get your items, you can absolutely wreck games like 1v5. And so that's kind of why I put it up here. Maybe a little bit biased myself for putting it here, but I think it definitely does deserve it. Then for B tier, we're starting it off with Abaddon, and this hero became a core in the 7.38 patch. I mean, it was always sort of played as a core, but not really. It was more of an obscure thing, but then it became really, really good. Definitely as an offlaner, it was S tier, and then as a carry, you maybe could have put it in S tier. At the very least, it was A tier, but it got significant nerfs, probably as big of a nerf that happened in the patch at all, right up there with DK. And so now it's just dropped off a bit. You can definitely still pick it. It's definitely still viable. It's just not as good as it once was. Like, if you have last pick as a carry player, let's say your mid, picked second phase for you, and you feel like you need some kind of frontline tankier hero, you can definitely pick this. It is still good. It's just not like overpowered. It doesn't dominate every single lane like it used to. It can just feel underwhelming in certain specific matchups. Also, the other problem is AA is also very good now. So that is a pretty hard counter to the hero. That didn't even matter. I mean, AA has been good this whole patch. It's just this hero was so good that it didn't even really matter. Now that is more of a consideration because AA is probably going to be picked like in every single game for the most part. So anyway, that's Abaddon. Still viable, still good, just not the best. Then we have Tiny here, and this hero I feel like could be even put in A tier, maybe even like pro meta. It's S tier. But personally, I feel Tiny as a carry is just not that good in pubs because it takes some level of coordination. Now, you wouldn't really think that because the hero's super tanky. It did get a lot of nerfs too. Probably before the nerfs, even in pubs, I would have put it A tier. But the nerf to the armor, you're just not nearly as tanky as you once were. And I feel like it can have kind of awkward stages. In some ways, you're reliant on your team because I feel like I get kited, and then maybe it's a me problem, but that this hero gets kited more than a lot of other heroes. Yes, you do have your stun and your throw that you can kind of burst one hero, but then other than that, you really have to be able to sit there and right-click people for a while because your attacks can be very, very slow unless Echo Saber's up and you get those 2 quick attacks in. So you're kind of reliant on your team doing a lot of stuff around you because you really just kind of are the slow waddling guy that if you can click, if you can use your combo, it ends up working, but you're not as independent as let's say a Slark or an Ursa or even like a PA. Like, you have to play around what your team's doing and they have to coordinate around you so that you can actually get your damage out. And that's why I don't like it as much in pubs. Plus with the nerfs, it's not nearly as tanky and overwhelming. Then next we have Magnus, another hero that kind of got nerfed, but is definitely being played as a carry a lot. This hero seems to always be sticking around in the meta, kind of like these other heroes that just seem to always be some kind of like A or B, maybe as an off lane, it's an S here and there. It still does all those same things. It's still very good, but the real reason this hero has been played more as a carry is because you can farm the ancients that are right near your lane, and you get that facet that just has that, like, basically it's not permanent, like every time you click you get the damage. It's not a ton of damage, but you pretty much never have to cast Empower on yourself, and so you can still cast it on allies, but you pretty much always have Empower, and that's what makes this hero able to be a carry because of the dynamic of farming the ancient camp and having that permanent Empower on you. So it is good. You still have that team fight. It is a tanky strength hero. You can still do all of those things that you would do before, but it is a little bit matchup dependent. You can have some rough lanes, and sometimes your damage can be a little bit lacking, although your team fight is great in certain lineups where you feel like you're lacking in damage. You don't have a lot of damage from your mid or off lane, let's say, or even your supports. It can feel a little bit weird and awkward and just not as good as some of these other heroes. And again, you are independent in some ways, but you don't want to like rely on just blink skewering and stuff like that as a carry Magnus, which is kind of the problem of why it goes to B tier, where in another lane or another role, like let's say off lane, for instance, which obviously is the other good one, you can have a great lane where you're doing a lot of right click damage. That's fantastic. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Like, you can just blink skewer people and stuff like that. And that can be enough to actually have insane impact with your ultimate and everything like that. That's not the case with Carry Magnus. You need to be able to right click because you are the right clicker on your team, and just certain games that's not really going to happen. Then next we have Terrorblade. Again, another one of these heroes that is more of a pro hero, it feels like. That seems like it always tries to come back in the pro meta, even when it feels like it's not great in pubs. And that's sort of similar to what is happening right now. I would say I don't love it in pubs just because I feel like teams don't play around the ultimate very well. And there's so many instances where you could just press your ultimate and then your team doesn't do what they need to do to actually ensure that the fight happens. And then the enemy just has this free window where you can't really do much. That's the biggest issue, honestly, where pros are able to play around that, or even high MMR players are able to play around that a lot. But it is a patch where you do have a decent lane. You can honestly dominate some lanes. You're good at farming with your illusions and then also going to these awkward jungle camps. So that definitely helps the hero. And then if you can kind of have that snowbally game, you are very, very hard to deal with at that mid-game portion because you can farm so fast. So it is at this weird middle point. That's why it's B. It's not like broken by any means. It can take advantage of certain aspects of the new map and the new game, but not in the best way. And then Spectre, I thought the nerfs were going to like delete the hero, make it C or D. But actually, it's still okay. It still can do the same thing that, like, let's say a Nature's Prophet can do now, where it can be everywhere. So you can still kind of farm in those awkward spots, which definitely helps the hero. But it isn't really a lane dominating hero. It's not one of these heroes that is hard to kick out of lane. Like, it can be tanky sort of, but it's really not that hard to kick this hero out of the lane. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest problem, but you can still go for these items that it was going for before. Like, the build can still be the same, it's just not as good in the meta specifically because of the map and the lane being so important, but also just because it's not nearly as good being a universal hero now like it was when it was an agility hero, which was a little bit of an awkward change. And then the nerfs overall in 7.38 because it was such a good hero last patch. So surprisingly, I would say it does still come at B. You do all the same things you did before. It's just not nearly as effective and not really as good as some of these other carry heroes because of that. Then we have a couple interesting ones. So Faceless Void was like really bad for the longest time. This hero was probably actually like S or A tier for years, it felt like. And then they like nerfed it into Oblivion about a year ago or sometime, and then it just felt like it was D tier for the longest time. And now finally they were buffing this other weird ultimate that everyone was like, what is this, a joke? Why would you not take Chrono? Well, they finally made it good enough where people are picking it. So even though you can still pick normal Chrono in the carry position, this hero is getting more popular because of the other, I don't even remember what it's called. Let's just look at what it's called. It's called the Time Zone. That's right. So the Time Zone facet is the thing that's making this hero good. And even from the carry position, you can actually benefit from that. It is a little bit awkward though. It's more of like an offlaner with that Time Zone facet now than it is a carry, but you can still play it as a carry. It's still okay. It's just not the best. I put it here because of the win rate and pick rate right now. I don't know, maybe it'll kind of even become a better carry as time goes on, but I feel like this one is more of an offlaner. Maybe as a carry, it'll even drop off a little bit, but it seems to be an okay, kind of a weird spot. We'll see what happens with it as the patch develops. And then we also have Marcy, another one that's a little bit interesting. Like, the buff for the bringing people along with your jump can be very good for saving. It can be very good for initiating. This hero can be a very good carry, but it's always one of those where you can kind of do a lot of the same things from a different position, like offlane, even like 4 position these days. So do you really want this hero as your actual carry? It can work. It can be good, but sometimes it can feel underwhelming and awkward. So that's why I feel like these two carries are kind of in that same position where they probably are actually better in other roles, but right now they are viable and pretty decent heroes, so you can pick them as a carry. Then lastly for B tier, we have these 4 heroes, and I would say these are all kind of like cheese heroes, like Lone Druid, Meepo, Broodmother. As carries, they can kind of work, but they don't really get picked very much, and they're not that great right now, just kind of middle of the road. I don't think there's any real big cheese hero right now that's that good as a carry. I mean, unless you count Natures or Morphling, but I feel like those are actual typical carries. And then Clinks I kind of include there too, because again, a little bit of an awkward one. You can have some good lanes. Sometimes you just absolutely get dumpstered in lane. Then even transitioning into the mid game, it's more of like a ganking hero, less of just like a farming jungle hero, which is part of why this hero is decent now as a carry, because you don't really want to farm the jungle. You do want to participate more, but still it can be underwhelming in some games, is kind of cheesy. I just sort of include it in that whole grouping. Even if you might disagree, it is a little bit awkward. It's not like a traditional typical carry hero like you would think, and that's the problem. This hero doesn't really have a base position. Like, at one point it was a carry, but they changed it, got rid of that build, got rid of the way it worked. And so now, is this a mid? Is it a carry? You know, it's just hard to say. And that's sort of the same thing with a lot of these heroes. Like, what core position do they actually play as their main position and role? It's a little bit weird. Then starting off C tier, this might be a little bit controversial, but I am putting Sven in the C tier. I know that like high MMR players and the pros have been picking Sven or like banning it, you know, even in the pro matches, and it just hasn't had the best win rate. I feel like it's just underwhelming. It feels like it's something where they're just kind of going to this hero because other things were banned or, you know, other things were picked, and I don't see it personally as being very good in pubs. And that's just me, but I honestly feel like you would rather have any of these other heroes up here. Like, it really feels like, okay, yeah, maybe you can farm, but even farming, like, yeah, you can, I guess, farm those ancients, and that can be kind of beneficial. But at a certain point, you just hit your timing, and you better win, because if you don't win at your timing at like 20 whatever minutes when you have more items than other people because of your innate battle fury, you kind of just fall off, and then it feels like, well, now I have a Sven and he doesn't do anything. So you really need to take advantage of farming as quickly as possible, but then also participating, because you can be a good participating hero with your ultimate and your stun, everything early. It can just feel a little bit awkward. I don't love the build on the hero either. I'm personally putting it C. You might disagree. Let me know why you think that. I just don't see it, especially as pubs. I feel like you're kind of getting baited by the pros and the better players into picking this in your pubs for the most part. That's just my opinion. Then we have Jug, and this is almost like, in a way, the opposite. Like, I feel like this hero sucks. I think most pro players probably would say this hero sucks. This hero was very bad last patch, and they nerfed it, which is kind of insane. But for whatever reason, in most pubs, it's a decent hero, and it can actually work for like most MMRs. That's why I'm putting it C. I personally would put it like D or almost even F if I really wanted to like give it the full judgment of what I think it should be. But I think for the most part, you are capable or able to pick this hero, and it's capable of carrying the game. And so it's C tier. I think it's a little bit harsh to put it D. I did actually have a game recently where my 4 position refused to pick. I was actually playing carry. I had the role queue for carry. My 4 position refused to pick and let the clock tick down. Like, we were losing infinity gold, and then I randomed a hero, and I actually random Jug, and we actually won the game. And I felt like, it wasn't that bad, but it was a good matchup, thankfully, and I just kind of got lucky as being the carry hero that I randomed to carry hero. But still, anyway, that's just a whole story to say I don't think the hero, even playing it recently, is not as bad maybe as I feel like it is. It just makes me annoyed that I felt like it wasn't very good and they nerfed it. So it's like, what's happening? Then Troll, another one of these heroes where maybe you could argue for it to be B. I could see it kind of being on the upswing potentially. Maybe eventually at the end of the patch it even becomes A, but I just really feel like it's not at the best spot right now. I just think it will never be up here. It will never consistently stay up here until you can control your ultimate. I just don't think that's something, as people get better at the game, as the, you know, people have more items, more spells, more things to do in the game, and more resources on the map. Not being able to control yourself is just something I don't think, and I say this every time, is going to be good. So I feel like people always experiment with it, say, oh, it's not that bad, you know, maybe we'll put it in B or A, and then it just feels like it never sticks. Like, maybe there's a week or two where people are playing it more, and it's like, oh, it's not bad, but then it's like, wait, actually, no, the win rate isn't very good, and we're going to stop picking it. It feels like that happens all the time with this hero. Thing is, I used to play this hero a long time ago, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, but I wish it would come back in the meta. I do enjoy playing it. I just don't love it right now. I think they have buffed it to the point where it is one of the heroes on this list that, look out, as the meta develops, it could go up, like I said, but right now I just don't love it. Then Alchemist is like, okay, it's at an okay spot, but not a very good spot. Got some decent nerfs, like was a very good hero a few patches ago, but right now, with the camps being awkward, it doesn't feel like there's really many places for you to farm. There's not really anywhere to retreat to necessarily. The jungle's just a little bit more spread out. All those things just make this hero not as good with the numbers, nerfs, and all that kind of stuff. You can still pick it. It still is okay, but a lot of these other heroes will just absolutely dominate you in different matchups and things like that. And so I think that's why this hero is not great right now. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There's not really much different. If anything, honestly, it feels like people are picking it more as like a Ags giving hero or something, with the shard and the Ags and stuff like that, and as a support even maybe, or like an off lane. But yeah, it's still a carry and can still be okay, but not that great. Bristleback, another one that was really, really good a few patches ago and then has just been consistently nerfed and now is kind of dead. It still does the same thing, it just doesn't do it nearly as well. And it doesn't, again, with the stacking and the jungle being weird, it feels like you can't snowball it as much. And with the numbers just being a little bit worse, it's just down here in C. And that's why, like, Alchemist, Bristleback, you can still pick it, just not very good. Luna, you would think, would be one that would benefit from the Ancient Camp being there, and that is true, but if you get kicked out of lane too early because this hero isn't the best laner of all time, sometimes that can feel awkward because you don't really want to be farming that Ancient Camp right there and like stacking it and getting low health right next to your tower if you're getting pressured. So that can just feel a little bit weird. And like I said, these heroes that have like Sven, like Luna, like even Medusa, which I'll talk about in a minute, even like Gyro here, even though, you know, Gyro has been played in the pro meta, which it feels like this is another hero kind of like Terrorblade that always comes back in the pro meta. These kind of farmers like that aren't really the big meta heroes right now. Like we see with Slark, Ursa, Lifestealer, all these heroes, you know, Monkey, that lane dominate, kind of want to stay in their lane and can protect their tower and don't feel like they need to retreat to the jungle. And that's just Luna, that's Gyro. That's even Medusa, which I'm putting over here, which is like one of these ranged heroes. Then you have the Drow and the Templar, another one of those where even though it's not the farming hero, it is kind of like if you get the perfect Drow game, you have a good game, you get your items, you can absolutely dominate. But there's a lot of things like Ember's super popular, Puck, Queen of Pain. There's so many things like even Nature's Prophet, Spectre, Slark, Ursa. Like there's so many things that can just get on top of you and just destroy you. And your lane is not going to be that good in some matchups that this hero can just feel like it does absolutely nothing. Same thing with TA. You can have lanes and games where you just snowball out of control and you hit this insane 20 to 30 minute timing that you just do more damage than anyone else on the map. But that's not really reliable in a lot of games. And if you ever die like once, it feels like on this hero, the game is just over. Whereas Drow Ranger doesn't necessarily feel that way. You are a very good like tower defense or like high ground defense hero. But still, it's just, having a good game is not very secure on either of these heroes. Then we have Riki. I think just basically Riki is semi-viable because the cloud is just so good against like Slark, Ursa, Lifesteal, like a lot of these heroes that requires them to have like BKB, that even though they buy it normally, especially against Lifestealer that doesn't love to buy BKB, that almost like makes him a pretty good counter to these heroes, and that's why he's semi-viable. But clearly he's only C tier because he's not that good. Like I feel like his damage is not nearly as good as it once was, maybe a year or so ago, and then they nerfed the tricks of the trade and stuff like that. They nerfed the multipliers and things on this hero, so it's viable but not great. Same thing with Muerta, viable but not great. If you just look at the pick rate and win rate, it probably deserves to be here, but I could even see putting it in D tier because I don't really see it very much. It's just okay. Like I would hope that this hero gets some buffs and some changes. I think they keep nerfing the calling, like, you know, the AoE spell with the silence. They keep nerfing that over and over again because that was the thing that kind of made this a 4 position for the most part. I almost think they should just like get rid of the spell, give her a new spell, and do something else to make her a more viable carry, because I want to see her as a carry, not as a 4 position. Like I'd rather this be a straight up carry. And you can still do it. It just can be a little bit awkward now, especially with the way the meta works. And in the same way, similar to like Drow Ranger, and also with the new Revenant's Brooch and stuff like that can be weird too. Then we have Razor. Just a hero that can dominate the lane, but then farms pretty slowly compared to these other heroes that can dominate the lane, but then also farm a lot quicker with the camps being awkward. Is very much an anti-carry hero that doesn't really benefit as much from the fact that these heroes can kind of escape the link. The link was also, I think the shard was nerfed and other stuff like that. Seems like another hero that kind of sticks in the meta, like always seems to come back into the meta here and there because people realize, oh wait, draining someone's damage the whole time can be insanely good, but still not that great right now. CK just floats between being a good carry and a good offlane, kind of at this awkward stage where they feel like, you know, it seems like they want to buff the more support facet, the offlane facet, where you're not just going for like illusions and stuff like that. You're going for that like break and silence and everything. And that was what was good last patch, is those illusions, like spawning more and having strong illusions and everything, which they nerfed. So now it feels like, well, if we're not having that, it's not as good of a carry. Maybe we'll go for the offlane or even like 4 position maybe build, but that hasn't really been popular. Nobody's really figured that out fully. So it's really kind of at a bad, awkward spot. You could still pick it as a carry, but again, not very good. Then Tide is the last one here because I know this is kind of becoming popular. This is a hero that's been pretty good. It did get nerfed in the B patch, maybe mostly for offlane, I'd say. But still, that's like the main role is an offlane hero. But you can still pick it as a carry. It just, I put it last here because it's kind of awkward. I don't know how good of a carry it actually is. I still think we have to give it some more time actually to figure out if this is actually a very good carry. I could see people saying, it's not that good, it's pickable, it's D or C tier. And then I could see people actually starting to say, no, wait, actually, this is very, very good. Let's put it all the way up to A, you know, because after the meta develops a little bit more, we find that this hero is still super hard to bring down, still super tanky, still does a ton of damage. It's just still at a figuring out the full extent to which this hero is good kind of stage. Not just because of the changes, but also because of the nerfs. So I think if the nerfs to the hero didn't happen, it may be an A tier carry and like an S tier off lane. Now with those nerfs, it's still a little bit weird. And that's kind of what I want to communicate is like, I'm putting it in C. I'm just putting it on the list in general. It could be somewhere else in the next couple weeks. Then for D tier, the last of the viable heroes, I would say, at the carry position, we have Bloodseeker, and I was debating actually putting this hero in F tier because they absolutely killed the hero, and I'm kind of sad about that. I still think it's like okay, and I think the only reason why it's okay is now you can get that shield that was pretty good, like with the overheal on the shard, so you don't even need to buy the Ags, but still the Ags, I just felt like the whole way that the hero was built was pretty cool because people finally figured out after a while of the hero kind of being that way with that new Ags, how to actually make it work. And it was this unique, like not necessarily right-click damage, pure damage, AoE, magic damage hero. Now, it was overpowered. It was broken, like with the shield and everything was just absurd. But they should have just nerfed the numbers and kept it that way because it was so unique and cool. Now they switched up the Ags and the shard. They kind of switched them, and then they got rid of like that AoE damage thing. And now it just feels like, well, what do you really do with the hero? I feel like buying Ags is kind of bad now. So now it's just back to like, okay, do we just buy Maelstrom on the hero? Like, I don't even know. Like, I guess we'll still go the Radiance build. So that now the build is not figured out anymore. Doesn't really do all the same stuff. I feel like the only reason it's in D and not F is because you still have that overheal shield that you can get with the shard, and now you don't even have to buy the Ags to get that. So that could potentially make the hero good because having that heal and that overshield thing, even though it still decays, is still decent. I think that was one of the biggest things that made the hero good. So getting that for only 1,500 can be good. I don't know. I just hate that they killed the hero. It just honestly makes me sad. Then Wraith King, just kind of in an awkward spot. The skeletons don't feel as good. The fact that you have to pick the skeletons of the other facet, you probably would rather have the other facet as a carry. The skeletons can be good in very specific matchups though, but it feels like more and more people can deal with the skeletons. I think it's good in, the lower MMR you go, probably the better this hero is. But right now, it's honestly one like Jug where I feel like people pick these heroes as carries or whatever in like middling to lower MMRs because they're like safe. And so then what happens is Valve kind of like nerfs them a bunch, even though they're not very good at most MMRs or high MMRs or Pro Dota, because if they're good at that point in Pro Dota or whatever, they're just absolutely going to be stomping pubs. So it's almost like I have no faith that these heroes will ever be good again in a way. I mean, the last time this hero was good, it was like off lane. It was just absolutely destroying people. So that's the biggest problem with Wraith King is like the numbers are just way worse than all these other heroes. Like, oh, you have 2 lives, but like who cares, because all these other heroes just do way more things, better laning, better damage, better scaling into the late game, just better everything, honestly. And even the way that you have impact with this hero too is like buying Ags and stuff and like weirdly keeping your team alive and doing extra damage and all this kind of crazy weird stuff. Then SF hasn't really been a carry for a long time, or at least since they nerfed it into Oblivion. But I still think you could actually still go for that kind of carry SF build, even though it's not as good. It's just all the way down in D tier because of that. Not really too much else to say since they nerfed it like even a few patches ago, not even in the 7.38 patch. Then Weaver's actually okay right now as like a support and stuff. It's getting picked a lot in those areas, but as a carry, it's not great. I personally like Weaver. I think it is okay. It can dominate lanes. It can like stay in its lane and be hard to kill, but there's a lot of things that actually counter it now. Like Night Stalker is a huge hero right now, a great offlaner, even being picked in other lanes, and that's a big nerf or like counter to Weaver that makes this really not pickable because you don't want your carry to be countered by one spell, and then the only way you can deal with that is basically buying BKB. And so that's what makes this hero pretty bad, I feel like, just matchup wise. And then like you want these other heroes to be a little bit more tanky and like survivable in your, even though it's a ranged hero that can dominate lanes and be survivable, it still doesn't feel as good as these other ones. It doesn't give any control or anything like that either, for the most part. Then we have Wind Ranger, which along with Weaver is one of those where you actually benefited from the old Maelstrom build into Gleipnir, and that's something that Weaver and Wind Ranger aren't really going to go anymore. So now it's like, what really is the build? So this hero, you could still like play it, you know, in most pubs and honestly dominate in certain matchups and like one-shot people, but it's not nearly as good at that. Simply, I think, because of the Gleipnir change. Then Kez, I'm going to put D tier. Seems like people are actually having some success with it. I could be, you know, argued into putting it into C tier, but I honestly just feel like I want to put a D or even like put it F tier just to give a signal to Valve of like, please buff this hero, because why did you nerf it into Oblivion? It was very powerful at one point. People were playing it a bunch, like crushing on it. I get that, but it's a new hero. Like, make it good, make it fun. Why do we immediately have to kill the hero? Even though I felt like it was at an okay spot. Like, why kill it further than it needed to be? And now it's like dead, so please buff it. And then Arc Warden, I think with the changes, it's not really a carry anymore. So that's why as a cheese pick, it's like last on here. It might even be deleted from the list, maybe more of a mid now. Kind of like it was back in the old days where you just TP'd with the Boots of Travel to the side lanes and had a lower duration ultimate. It feels like they changed it up in a completely different direction and now kind of reverted it back. And I feel like it's hard to say whether that's going to be a good carry, because I think back then that was a better mid, and now it's probably just a better mid because of how it works. Then lastly, we have F tier, and actually I'm putting Pudge here in F tier. People have been trying to make Pudge work as a carry with the new facet where you get more damage while you have Rot running, but it's not much. I think it's like, what, 25 damage or whatever it is? It's like not very much. It's almost like similar to the mag thing, where as you hit, you get Empower. It's kind of like a similar concept in that way, but I feel like it just doesn't work. Like, I don't think it's very good. People are trying to experiment with it, but I'd rather see this hero in another role. And I think this hero overall has been nerfed, because even with the hook now as a support and everything, which I'll get to that in those other videos, but now you don't have that extra damage. Like, you have to get that on your shard, I think, and the shard is now not like the save that it was. So there's just all these things about the hero that's not as good, but specifically as a carry, yeah, you still go the Ags, you still go for that facet and stuff and try to go for more like a right-click build, but people are going like weirdly, I don't even know, aren't they going like Vanguard, Mask of Madness and stuff? That just feels like, is that really good? Like, I don't know. I'm putting it at F tier. I'm saying that's not good. Don't pick it. Don't grief my game, please. I don't think that's good. And then Lina, not a good carry. It feels like the hero either is a carry sometimes with the right-click build or like a mid. Obviously, it was a mid. They nerfed that, and the carry build hasn't really come back into fruition or to like into the meta at all. And Gleipnir, I think, another thing that makes that pretty bad. Then Sniper, don't play this carry. It's more of a mid. People like to like rotate and play this hero as a mid. That's fine. I just hate it as a carry because it just feels awkward to me. You're not mobile. You can't run around and participate in fights as much. You have to TP. The camps are super awkward to farm. I just don't like this hero as a carry. And then last two are like the same hero. Just illusion heroes are terrible right now. I know Terrorblade's kind of an illusion hero, but I would love to see... I hesitate to say that. I wouldn't love to see an illusion hero meta, to be honest, because everyone hates illusion hero metas. Like, when you have a Phantom Lancer running around every game just like being annoying as shit, it's like impossible to deal with. I hate that. Everyone hates that. But it's one of those things where we haven't had an illusion hero meta for like so long. Like, this hero has been so bad for so long. I'm putting it in F and saying, like, can we please get some love for this hero? Like, in the next big patch, just make it an illusion hero meta, please, or something. I don't know. I just kind of want to see it, mix it up a little bit. And then the heroes that are good against illusion heroes, that'll kind of mix things up too. I don't know. Maybe I'm just delusional and just maybe it's good to keep Phantom Lancer bad forever. Hey, whatever. I guess that's kind of fine with me, but it is one of those where I just like mixing things up for the sake of it a lot of times too. And so that is my carry tier list for patch 7.38b. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, anything you think I missed or should be changed here. As always, guys, if you like the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.